Good morning, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you might be doing. We wish to welcome you to the Silverlight Show. The Silverlight shines to illuminate that which lies hidden in darkness. For those of you tuning in today, we welcome you in. Chapter 19. It's funny, we've talked about genocide, we've talked about Armageddon. This is the only one I really feel like I need to issue a trigger warning on. Lots of messed up stuff. You have potential rape, you have violence, you have, I can't even be, incest. This one is loaded with some serious Game of Thrones crap. And let's just do this. Chapter 19. The two angels arrived in Sodom in the evening, as Lot was sitting at the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to greet them, and bowing low with his face to the ground, he said, "Please, my lords, turn aside to your servant's house to spend the night and bathe your feet, that you may be on your way early." But they said, "No, we will spend the night in the square." But he urged them strongly, so they turned his way and entered his house. He prepared a feast for them and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. They had not yet lain down when the townspeople, the men of Sodom, young and old, all the people to the last man, gathered about the house, and they shouted to Lot and said to him, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them to us that we may be intimate with them." Lot went out to them to the entrance and shut the door behind him and said, "I beg you, my friends, do not commit such a wrong. Look, I have two daughters who have not known a man. Let me bring them out to you, and you may do to them as you please. But do not do anything to these men, since they have come to under the shelter of my roof." But they said, "Stand back, the fellow," they said, "came here as an alien, and already he acts the ruler. Now we will deal worse with you than with them." And they pressed hard against the person of Lot and moved forcefully to break the door. But the men stretched out their hands, pulled Lot into the house with them, and shut the door. And the people who were at the entrance of the house, young and old, they struck with blinding light, so they were helpless to find the entrance. Then the men said to Lot, Whom else have you here? Sons-in-law, your sons and daughters, or anyone else that you have in the city? Bring them out of this place, for we are about to destroy this place, because the outcry against them before the Lord has become so great that the Lord has sent us to destroy it. So Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law who had married his daughters, and said, "Up, get out of this place, for the Lord is about to destroy the city." But he seemed to his son-in-laws as one who jests. As dawn broke, the angels urged Lot on, saying, "Up, take your wife and your two remaining daughters, lest you be swept away because of the iniquity of the city." Still he delayed. So the men seized his hand and the hands of his wife and his two daughters in the Lord's mercy on him, and brought him out and left him outside the city. When they had brought them outside, and one said, "Flee for your life. Do not look behind you, nor stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the hills, lest you be swept away." But Lot said to them, "Oh no, my lord. You have been so gracious to your servant, and have already shown me so much kindness in order to save my life. But I cannot flee to the hills, lest the disaster overtake me and I die. Look, that town there is near enough to flee to. It is such a little place. Let me flee to it. It is such a little place, and let my life be saved." He replied, "Very well. I grant you this favor too, and I will not annihilate the town of which you have spoken. Hurry, flee there, for I cannot do anything until you arrive there." Hence the town came to be called Zoar. And the sun rose upon the earth, and Lot entered Zoar. The Lord rained upon Sodom and Gomorrah sulphurous fire from the Lord out of heaven. He annihilated those cities and the entire plain, all the inhabitants of the cities and the vegetation of the ground. Lot's wife looked back, and she thereupon turned into a pillar of salt. Next morning, Abraham hurried to the place where he had stood before the Lord. And looking down towards Sodom and Gomorrah and the land of the plain, he saw the smoke of the land rising like the smoke of a kiln. Thus it was thus it was when God destroyed the cities of the plain and annihilated the cities where Lot dwelt. God was mindful of Abraham and removed Lot from the midst of this upheaval. Lot went up from Zoar and settled in the hill country with his 2 daughters, for he was afraid to dwell in Zoar, and he and his 2 daughters lived in a cave. And the older one said to the younger, Our father is old, and there is not a man on earth to consort with us in the way of all the world. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and let us lie with him, that we may maintain life through our father. That night they made their father drink wine, and the older one went in and lay with her father. He did not know when she lay down or when she rose. The next day the older one said to the younger, See, I lay with father last night. Let us make him drink wine also, that you go and lie with him, that we may maintain life through our father. That night also they made their father drink wine, and the younger one went and lay with him, and he knew not when she lay down nor when she rose. Thus the 2 daughters of Lot came to be with child by their father. The older one bore a son and named him Moab. He is the father of the Moabites of today. And the younger one bore a son, and she called him Ben-Anami, and he is the father of the Ammonites to today. That's the end of the chapter, but nowhere close to the end of the questions. So these 2 angels show up. Lot's hanging out by the gate. That's a little bit unusual. Even ancient times, it's not really something where people hang out by the gates just looking for strangers. But again, we see these prophets, these men as they are called, who have come from the Lord. Whatever you want to call them, angels, beings, your choice. I'm not going to argue the title. They stand out. Not only does Lot recognize them from a distance and begs them to come with him, but the townspeople recognize them. Whatever they're doing, and the best way to explain it is your image of a halo. That little circular thing goes around people's heads that's all gold. Yeah, it might not necessarily be a halo, but something about them is shining. Remember, Elohim in the Bible means the shining ones, and God addresses them a lot. It's not unreasonable to think if these beings carry the mark of God and are in his image, which is an important phrase, that they would also be shining. We can also see they have the power to defend themselves. They can summon light to blind everybody. And yeah, it's not very pleasant for anybody to get struck by this blinding spell. But we're getting to that. The disturbing part is how Lot treats his daughters. We have the daughters he has already married off to his sons-in-law, and that's mentioned later on. But when he's got 2 daughters there, and they're trying to capture these angels, the people of Sodom are trying to be intimate with them, Lot offers his virginal daughters. This is uncomfortable on so many levels, and as a parent, I'm sure you would agree, it's unfathomable. But for some reason, Lot feels he must go that far to sacrifice to keep these beings safe. They pay him back by rescuing him, but still, just wow. Now the curious thing is, in this town, where they're obviously familiar with divine beings, they have seen them before, Lot goes to his sons-in-laws and says, we got to get out of here. They take it as a joke. Not one of his daughters listens to him. Lot is clearly not as charismatic as Abraham. That's just an observation of his personality, though. The angels are very specific, and they are called angels later on in verse 15. They're just men in the beginning. Actually, no, sorry, they are angels. They were men in the chapter before, but this one, they are angels. My apologies, I forgot. And they start negotiating again. This is weird. They're in a real hurry to get him moving at one moment. It's like it's a disaster that cannot be avoided. You gotta go. Morning's coming, you gotta get out of the city. But he asks if he can go to the town of Zoar. And they say, cool. This is where things... Okay, first of all, we get the sun rising, and right then God starts raining sulfur and sulfurous fire onto Sodom and Gomorrah and wipes them out. This is the supposed area of the Dead Sea, the South Dead Sea. We have Lot's wife famously turning into the so-called pillar of salt, which does match the geology. I'm trying to think of the word. Basically the area of the Dead Sea. There's lots of pillars of salt there. There's also the fact that the word for salt is not really truly defined. We interpret it as salt out of tradition. But, again, I'm going to go to Zechariah Stitchin here for a second, because when you're raining salt and brimstone, the human body does not easily become salt. It has a pretty high salt content, especially in our modern diets. But the human body doesn't just magically become salt. No. I do prefer Zechariah Sitchin's interpretation where it became a pillar of ash. Because, again, sulfur, fire, brimstone, all those things, yeah, the body's going to turn to ash. I find that a little easier to accept. So, Abraham looks out, see everything's messed up, doesn't know anything about Lot, but that's all cool with him. He just goes back and that's it. It's cameo. That's all we got in here. Just Abraham as a cameo, walks on and walks off. Then we find this really, really, really curious thing. So Lot and his daughters have fled to a town. They then leave that town and go and dwell in the mountains. But for some reason, his daughters then decide that they're the last people on Earth and decide to continue the human race by using the only source available to them. Yeah, this section is not easy to discuss. If they had just come from a town and they can look out and see that Sodom and Gomorrah were annihilated, but not the whole world, you're kind of going from a reaction of 0 to 100 in no time at all. It's very curious. An overreaction, or perhaps, well, ultimately it's a political justification for reasons to distrust the Moabites and the Ammonites. Because Israel was at war with a lot of people and had a lot of dislikes. We already discussed Canaan and, yeah, his iniquity. And here we show that the Moabites and Ammonites are literally mother effers. Lot lay with his children and they became mothers. It's a very discomforting part of the Bible. There's no good way to do it. But once again, we see this idea of wine. Wine is continued from Noah's line up until this present time. I have postulated that Noah was a vintner before the flood, which it was referring to cursed earth and stuff like that. Wine would be a very popular item back then. And vineyards are very labor intensive for short periods of the year. A lot of the magic takes place sitting in barrels. But here we are, Lot's there in the mountains, surviving with his kids, but he has wine, and he has enough wine to get drunk several times, because he doesn't even question it when they keep filling his glass. And he gets blackout drunk. So, yeah, there's lots of wine. So whatever's happening, his daughters know that they're surviving perfectly well. They just came from a town. The leap in logic to there's nobody else around is really phenomenal. The way the angels are talking, Zoar is halfway between Sodom and the mountains. Because remember, the angels originally wanted them to go to the mountains. Now, this is another possibility too. The angels purposely sent him to the mountains to fulfill a future where the Moabites and the Ammonites are a reality. God does usually have a tendency to plan ahead. It doesn't always come out, like we have seen several times, but this seems to be very deliberate, if a bit disturbing and disgusting. Okay, we're done with that chapter. The rest of the Bible, I'm not going to tell you it gets better, but it's not going to get easier. But we've got past the first major hurdle. If you enjoyed this episode, we hope you liked this episode. Please subscribe and share. If you want to support the channel, we are not yet monetized, so buying one of the books will help us out. For the cost of 99 cents, you can get an ebook. For under $10, you can get a paperback and all sorts of subjects, including The Secrets of Solomon, which will come in handy when we look at Kings and Judges and Samuel. That will all happen. That's a long-term preview, though, and I'm not going to tell you the whole book in this series. No matter what, we appreciate you listening. Thank you very much, and we hope you have a fantastic day.